Greetings, YouTube. I was just looking at one of those listicles, and it was about saving money, about being frugal, and they seem to be concentrating on food-related forms of frugality. And I was struck by how incredibly narrow-minded and short-sighted it was. For example, they say shop around, because you can find different things, different stores for less money. We often call those loss leaders. So like the store knows it's going to lose money on this particular item, but if it gets you in the door because of that item, then they know that you will buy other things or are likely to buy other things, which will cost you more in their store than someplace else. So they're willing to take a bath on the first thing if it means they can make up that amount on other items, particularly if those items are tied in some way to that first item. That's really good if you've got your own car and the money to pay for gas, or you live in a place that has an excellent uh, public transportation system. It's also really good if you've got the time. If you only work one job, it's not so good if you're working two or sometimes even three jobs. It isn't good if you're going to school and and you have a job, part time or full time. It isn't so good if you have kids. It isn't so great if you have some kind of physical or mental illness, or if you're neurodivergent. There's lots of reasons why shopping around isn't necessarily a great option for you. And to flippantly suggest to other people that, oh, just shop around, you'll find bargains, is not great. Not good optics on that. Another thing was, buy whole things and then break them down into serviceable pieces on your own. So you buy whole vegetables or whole fruits, and then you portion them out yourself, um, which is good if you can do it. If you have the physical capacity to stand at a counter or sit at a table in case you can't stand and have the physical strength to process those fruits and vegetables or meats or what have you into their constituent pieces, which then can be portioned out and stored in the freezer or in portioned out for the meal you're about to make. But what if you can't? Buying pre-cut stuff is not bad. Buying frozen vegetables as instead of fresh vegetables isn't bad. I have the physical capacity to cut up peppers and onions. I do. I just cut up an onion today for dinner. But I don't want to. It's just easier for me to buy a bag in the frozen food section of peppers and onions because I use 8 ounces of those every single night during the week for dinner. So I can just reach in there, I weigh it out, I use half the bag, put the other half back in the freezer. The next day, don't even have to weigh it. I know I've got half of it already, and I'm done. It's to me, it tastes just as good as the fresh stuff, and I didn't have to go through that effort. It saves me time. And at one point, that was just all I was saving, but thanks to being older, thanks to arthritis, and thanks to COVID, I have a lot of fatigue now. Yes, I could stand there and cut at that stuff. I've got the knife skills, I've got the knives, I know how to keep them sharp. I just don't want to do it. Um, like another suggestion, of course, is buy in bulk. Awesome if you have access to some place that you can buy in bulk. That's convenient to you. That you have some ability to get the bulk items from their location to your home. Can you afford to buy in bulk? Because yes, you may be paying less per pound or per whatever the unit in question is than you would if you bought smaller quantities, but can you afford to make that initial purchase? I mean, if we can, we buy 50-liter bags of sawdust style litter for our cats. And that costs more than buying the smaller bags, eh, but it goes further. So if I buy one big bag, that's going to go like 2.5 bags of smaller litter, but you have to have the money to buy that bigger bag to get the savings. And if you're juggling your bills and, for example, you're not sure if that bill is going to get, that check is going to clear before the next one comes in, you don't necessarily have that ability to pull that off. So, as people have said in the past, being poor is expensive. You don't think of it that way because the people making suggestions, like in this listicle I saw, don't have to think that way. They're privileged like that, and they're completely unaware of it. Hence, the whole privilege part. They don't realize that you may not have the time or the energy or the physical capacity or the ability to move things from place to place the way that a person who has a car, who has a partner, who may not have kids, who is able-bodied and doesn't have to worry about standing at a counter cutting things up. They don't have a disability of that variety. They don't have depression. That means that they find themselves sitting in one spot because they can't get up, or they have ADHD or some other executive dysfunction, which means they really want to do something. They understand they need to do something. They understand how completely important it is. For example, like the mess that's sitting behind me at the minute, but they can't. And they can't explain it, but they can't. And if you think you find that frustrating, take my word for it. Not as frustrating as those of us who have to fucking deal with it. So yeah, these helpful suggestions, not so helpful. It's kind of like I've tell people I'm diabetic. I don't hide the fact. I don't lead with it, but it tends to come up in conversation frequently because people will offer you things like, "Hey, would you like a piece of chocolate?" "No, thanks, I'm all set. I'm diabetic." Um, and then they'll often throw up little quips about how I should treat my diabetes or some remedy that they've heard that will cure my diabetes. I'm like, really? Have you have you run that past a peer-reviewed journal? Because if you have and they've gotten good results, you're going to give you a Nobel Prize. Um, so yeah, I have gotten things like that many times, and it gets worse the more obvious your disability is or your illness, because then the uninvited suggestions and advice is going to come far more rapidly. You don't need those you know, those canes or those crutches. You don't need that wheelchair. If you do X, Y, or Z, you'll just be fine. Or if someone in a wheelchair stands up because they can, suddenly they're getting crap because they stood up. Do you have that person's disability? Then shut up. It's none of your damn business. Or the judgment. I don't think you should have that placard for your car. You don't look disabled to me. That isn't your judgment call. If they have the placard, somebody thinks they're that disabled. So yeah, these kind of things, these helpful pieces of advice, not so friggin' helpful. And it really pisses me off when I see things like this. Because it gives the folks in the world who are privileged the idea that they can help the world around them if they just disseminate more helpful advice. If they just tell enough people about the things that work for them, the world would just get so much easier for so many people. Never for a second realizing that their particular life experience is not universal.